Welcome to the first in our three-part Virtual Excursions training program. My name's Jackie Randalls and I've coordinated this program for national delivery as part of my role managing Inspiring Australia in New South Wales. For those new to Inspiring Australia, it's the national strategy for public engagement with STEM. We work with hundreds of community partners to connect scientific researchers to big audiences. And today's training is all about doing just that in the virtual world. It will be produced and delivered by Fizzics Education, Sydney Science Education and Refraction Media. And I'd like to acknowledge support from the New South Wales Office of the Chief Scientist and Engineer and Inspiring Australia's state programs in New South Wales, the ACT, Queensland, Western Australia and South Australia.
Yeah, just thanks for having me today. Look, everyone, you're in my studio, my recording studio here today. My background, I guess, is probably more on the audio side of things. I also studied electrical engineering and I work in IT. And I guess what I do mainly for these guys is to integrate the AV, audio, visual and IT components of it. Obviously, doing this kind of work, there's a strong IT component you need to know. You need to know how the internet works and what's going on with the encoding and unencoding, but you also need to know how these things work and you need to know a bit about the cameras and the lighting. So what I'm going to do today is I'm just going to go through quick 10 points that I came up with that I think that things that pitfalls that you might fall into, are things that you really got to watch out for. Obviously today, in this short amount of time that we have, I'm not going to be able to go into every detail and every piece of room acoustics and microphones and everything. If you wanted to do an audio course, it's 12 months to learn all the ins and outs of it. But you can certainly buy off-the-shelf stuff and get a really good outcome just with, just plugging it in and going. So I guess just starting on that, my number one thing would be use a good camera. Okay. Obviously, the camera I've got here today is a little, just a little webcam on top of my computer here. But that the camera Ben's got and the camera some of the guys have got, and particularly Karen's camera is a Logitech PTZ camera, and that's a point and zoom camera. That's what PTZ stands for. And with a point and zoom camera, you can, I think she might be going to demonstrate it later, you can pan the camera around and you can set presets, and it's got a really good quality piece of glass in it, a really good quality lens. And when you're shopping for one of these things, you probably also want to make sure it's got really good low lighting capabilities as well, because it's sometimes really difficult to get the lighting right. And the digital cameras really like light. The more light you can get into them, the better. I've got a point I'm going to talk about lighting later. The second thing, I guess, is, and not so obvious, is to use a good microphone, obviously. Now the microphone I've got here today is a studio condenser microphone, and you can probably hear the sound quality difference over the dynamic microphones, the small diaphragm dynamic microphones that everyone else is using. This is a large diaphragm condenser microphone, and it catches a much wider frequency of sound. If you see any podcasters or guys on YouTube, they'll quite often have a microphone like this hanging down or sitting here like this, and that's the reason why it gets you a much better quality sound. Now, obviously, it's not always going to be convenient to use one of these, and depending on what you're doing, you're not always going to be able to use something like this. Now, in Karen's case, when she does presentations for Sydney Science Education, she uses what's called a boundary mic. And a boundary mic just sits on the desk and it picks up any sound that comes in from within that boundary. Obviously, with something like that, the microphone's further away from your mouth, and the further away from your mouth the microphone is, the less better the quality of the sound is going to be. You really want to get the microphone up close to your mouth. Now, the other alternative, and what they use in TV and broadcast, is called a lapel mic. And lapel mics just sit here. You might see on the news, they just see it hang off your lapel. And they can be really quite, you can get some really good results with those as well, but they can be a little bit finicky to use. They rustle on your clothes. You quite often have to use, they come with an RF unit, a wireless RF unit. You have to know how to use that. But I just discovered an alternative to that recently, and that is a USB lapel mic. So if you've got a laptop near you that's using Zoom, you can plug the USB lapel mic into it, put the lapel mic on your collar, and that means the microphone's closer to you, and you're not mucking around with all the wireless RF stuff. Another alternative might be what's called a shotgun mic, and they're the really big long mics that you have. I don't have one here with me, unfortunately. Now, typically, if you're doing something with a portable camera and you're putting a microphone on top of the camera, then you would use what's called a shotgun mic, and those mics pick up things at a long distance, only in that direction, and they don't pick up things that are all around. They can be quite good as well. So you've got a couple of different options there. Now, obviously, when you've got a mic and you're in the room, you want to speak nice and loudly and clearly into the mic, and you want to get as close as you can to the mic. Just going on from that, you want to make sure you've got good room acoustics. Now, here in my studio, obviously, I've got soundproofing on the walls and I've got acoustic proofing on the walls. So there's no reverb that's happening. So what you're hearing is just coming straight from my mouth into the mic. Now, sometimes that reverb and that slapback and that delay that happens, you might hear Ben's got a little bit of that. Karen will have a little bit of that because she's in a double brick room. That can be a little bit distracting for the audience. The guys that have got headsets on, that's a really good option because the microphone tends to be close to your mouth and you've got the earpieces there. And it does tend to eliminate that room acoustic problem. Once again, the closer you can get that mic to your mouth, the better. So just be aware of that. Some ideas of fixing the room acoustics: you can hang blankets on the walls. You can see I've got a bookshelf behind me there. That's intentional, that bookshelf. That's called a diffuser. If you have something like that, it'll just disperse the sound everywhere, and make it more of a direct sound. The thing with the sound is, the reason I'm spending so long on the sound, talking about the sound, is because quite often with a camera, you put a camera there and it's very obvious. You can see what the problem is. But with the sound, it's not so obvious. You don't get the feedback. Like right now I'm talking to you, I don't know what this sounds like going out to you guys, but I can see my image. So you've got to spend a little bit more time getting that sound right. Now, if the vision goes off, that's fine. You can still keep talking to each other. But if the sound goes out, that's the end of your conference. You can't talk to each other. You can't even communicate unless you're holding signs up like this. All right, so I'll move on here now. Let's talk a little bit about lighting. So you want to have good lighting, right? So digital cameras, mentioned before, they love lighting. Now, typically what you do with lighting is you do what's called three-point lighting. You do a top light, you do a side light, and you do a front light. And what you want to do is you want to get the lighting so that you want to focus on the face. You want to get the lighting so that you've got a nice even shadow here. Now, here in my studio, of course, I'm limited. I'm actually looking at a wall at the moment, and there's no way I can actually put a light there. Above me, I've got halogen lights, and as you can see, it's creating what's called a top light effect. Now, it's not too bad. If you've got a top light effect, then what you'll see is you'll see a big, deep shadow in the eyes, and you'll see a deep shadow under here, and it just looks horrible. What you want to do is you want to get it so that there's a nice shadow coming just across the face like that, but the face is still lit nicely. Now, you can achieve that just with a single light in front. You can buy small LED battery-powered lights that are meant to go on top of cameras, and you can just mount one of those on top of your computer monitor, or as I've done, as I will do in Karen's case, I've built a bespoke unit and we're going to mount them on there so that she can adjust the lighting to get it looking good. But be aware that lighting does change. If you've got a window near you or something like that, as the sun goes over, the light will change. Always just spend a bit of time making sure that lighting's correct and it looks good on the face, not too washed out, and you've got that nice shadow. And just following on from that, avoid backlighting. So backlighting is something that you really need to know about. So backlighting is when you have a light that's behind you, like a bright window or another light. Now, if you have that, what's going to happen is the camera will adjust its contrast and its brightness automatically. If it's usually these webcams are auto, and the subject will just look black because it will adjust to the brightest thing it sees, and the subject will just look completely black, and that will be completely useless to anyone. So really just do not have a backlight at all. Some cameras and some webcams have got a special backlight mode. I've tried to use those. It just never does it justice, never does properly what can be achieved just by putting a simple light just in front of you. So try and avoid that. Now, when you're composing your shot, think about the way the shot's framed. Now, everyone here has done a pretty good job today. What you need to do is you need to think very, very basic, and a very, very basic level. You want to think about the rule of thirds. Okay, now the rule of thirds is, if I was to draw across my screen here, a noughts and crosses field, like that, 2 lines and then 2 lines down the middle, just like that. You want that top line to run through the eyes. Okay, now I'm probably, there I would be too high, there I would be too low. So you want it to sit just like that, so it seems natural. The 2 side parts of the noughts and crosses the screen, you want just here, so it evenly divides it. Now, if you've got 2 people, obviously they're going to be here and here. If you've got 1 person, they're going to be in the middle. And that gives you a way to divide the screen up to make it look natural. Right? That's the basic rules of composition. There are other perfect ratio and other ways of doing it. But I think for our purposes, that's really what you want to think about. Now, I guess the last couple of points I've got here is just more around the practicalities of things. If you're, I've done video conferences where we've had multi-camera shoots, and we've put everything through a system called a TriCaster, and we've had to use tally lights and everything like a TV broadcast. And one of the key things that that's different about video conferences is obviously that reverse channel, that other people are talking to the presenters. So what you want to make sure you have is a way that you can see the audience that's compatible with where your camera is. So right now I'm looking at my camera and I'm looking at the audience, which is the other presenters, and everything looks natural. If your screen is off to the side, then obviously that's not going to work very well. You want to make sure that everything is set up in a way to make it as natural as possible. If you're going to do a multi-camera shoot, which is a more complicated thing, the presenter needs to be aware of which camera they're working to. Now, there's a couple of ways you can do that, but it's not always going to be where the screen is. If another camera over here switches on, but the screen is here with my audience, I need to look this way, despite the audience being here. So just be mindful of the way you lay that stuff out. Now, if you're presenting from home, or if you've got a business where you're presenting from, you need to have a good internet plan. I think it goes without saying. You need specifically to have an internet plan with a good upload speed. Now, NBN plans at the moment, you're getting typically 100 meg down. Now, you may not need 100 meg down. You might not be a Netflix watcher. You might not have 10 kids in the house on YouTube all day. But what's important with that 100 meg down speed is that you get 20 megabits up. That's the important bit. And why is that important? Because I'm here right now encoding this video, and it's going up to Zoom. It's going up to a hub where it's then being pushed out to everyone else. So you've got to get the video out. Now, typical NBN is 100 megabits down, 20 megabits up, but there are plans around which are 100 megabits down and 40 megabits up. Now, if you can get 40 megabits up, then you can probably do, you can definitely do high HD. I haven't tested it myself, but you can definitely do HD. You might even be able to do 4K video. So that's on my hit list to try that out over the next few weeks. My second to last point, look, learn your equipment. What else can I say? Spend some time, play with the mics, play with the cameras, muck around with the computer settings. You've got to spend the time to sit down and learn the equipment. You can't just roll up 5 minutes before the video conferencing, plug everything in and expect it all to work. That's not going to happen. You need to learn the equipment. You need to do some tests. Some test video conferences with people you know, or family and friends, using the equipment that you're going to use. That something might not work. You might get a bit of gear that doesn't work. So, all right, I have to buy something else. I have to ask someone else what's going on about that. There's lots of forums, lots of stuff on YouTube to learn how to do this. but try it out and, you know, learn your gear. And finally, just leading on, I think from what Ben was going to say, just start. Like, just plug it in and start. Like, don't be afraid. Like, once you use your gear, it's not going to be perfect. There's always problems. There's always problems. Like, there's the problem with the sound. You know, I've worked on sort of film shoots before, and it's always a lighting problem. There's always some problem with the lighting. Cameras, you know, if you're out in the field and things are running on batteries go flat. You know, there's internet problems. There's always problems, but I think the key is just to start. If you have a problem, then make sure you don't have that problem the next time. Ask some people. You've got Ben. You can probably reach out to me. We've got a question here. Yeah, I'll just finish. Probably reach out to me. Just start with what you're doing. So we've got a question. May I please ask what the best platforms are for hosting events with lots of people? Conference 300 to 400.
So
yes.
there's we've had several questions.
Yes.
Regarding cheap, affordable audio equipment.
Yes.
So maybe.
So all right. So basically, what you want to do? Let me just grab this.
You heard me. It was going to be all on the fly, right? Coming back.
This is on the fly. That's an audio control. It's an audio control one. This is the kind of thing you want. Now, I'm not saying, I'm sorry, this camera does not have autofocus. It's extremely annoying. Basically, what you want to do, you want to get yourself, that's made by Native Instruments. There's a company called Native Instruments, and there's a company called Sapphire that do really good audio interfaces. Sorry, Focusrite. There's Native Instruments one, and there's one from Focusrite. And that's just like a simple 2-channel audio interface, right? Probably cost you about $200-$300. You plug that in, goes in via USB, and then it's got a port here on it. You get a microphone like this, and you plug that in. That's how all the podcasters are doing it at the moment. Okay, and you plug that in, and that'll give you really good quality audio. Now, if you want to go with a USB, now if you're not up to doing something like that, you can go with what I mentioned before, a USB lapel mic. Now, there's a company called Boya, B-O-Y-A, and they make a really nice USB lapel mic, and it sits here and it plugs into your laptop, and it just comes up as an audio interface. So with Zoom here, for instance, we can just tell it to use that audio, that microphone input. So any other questions?
Yep, we've also got Cass is asking about how their live stream has new guest speakers each week from their homes, so they can't all get new equipment. Any recommendation on making it easy for them to look good?
To look good. If you've got a modern laptop, then it'll have a pretty good camera in it. There's no doubt to say I didn't use my laptop. I do have a new laptop. I didn't use it here today because I wanted to do things differently. But if you have a good laptop, then it'll have a pretty good camera in it. And once again, it's about the lighting. Now, most older homes will have one light in the center of the room. And the problem with that is you get this top lighting effect, and it creates the shadows under the eyes, and it looks horrible. So avoid them doing that. Now, if they're going to be in a room, get them to open the window. If it's during the day, you want to get lots of natural light in. So get them to open the window, but have the window in front of them so that they're looking out the window. That way the light will come in on them, and it won't be seen as a backlight to the camera. That's what I mentioned before. And they'll be lit up nicely, and the camera will see them nicely. If you can get light on the subject, then most new laptop cameras will look pretty good. Another question?
Yep. So Paula asks, do you have any tips for working outside in remote areas?
Yeah, it's a tough one. If you have a good 4G plan or 5G as it is these days, you can absolutely do it that way. It depends how remote you are. If you're really quite remote, I've done work with DART, Distance and Rural Technology Group, and we've actually gone out quite far, like out to Lake Mungo, and we had a satellite dish that was connecting to a remote satellite to give us our internet connection. So that's a really tough one. And everything, we had a generator, and everything was run from the generator. So you're talking, the further out you get, you're talking quite a big production. But if you're, say, just on a coast at a beach or something like that, you can use like a 4G wireless modem, and you can broadcast everything onto the 4G wireless modem and do it that way.
All right. So
any more questions?
Thank you very much, Steve. Is there any more questions there, Jackie?
There's just one more about connectivity. Jackie asks, what's the best way to plan ahead and deal with connectivity issues? Even in Sydney, my 5G drops in and out.
Yeah, look, I was actually going to mention this when I talked about the internet before. Look, it's the best way is going to be a fixed wired service. You can't beat having a fixed wired service. Now, if you're using it on Wi-Fi in your home, you're going to have problems. It's going to drop out. The error rate's high. The latency's high. So what the latency means is there's going to be there's a higher delay between me and the Zoom servers, for instance. 5G, 4G is difficult. If you're going back to what we're talking about remote for, you can get antennas. You can get extension antennas that actually plug into the modem. If you're doing it from home, you can get an antenna as well. They're easy enough to find on eBay. Just look for a 4G antenna that plugs into your 4G modem. And then what I would do if I was setting that up, I would actually get an extension cable, run it out the window and put it on the top of the house. Because if you're in a double brick house or you're in a valley or something like that, that's going to attenuate the signal coming into you. And you really want to try and avoid that. You want to get all those obstacles out of the way and just have a nice clean signal coming in. So I'd be looking for one of those external extension antennas.
Thank you for joining us for the Virtual Excursions training.